Once upon a very, very, very long time ago, there lived a wise old tramp. He lived in the hills, in the fields, and in the forests. He loved to breathe the fresh air, and it made him happy to be with all of the animals and plants that constantly surrounded him. He was quite content to spend day after day, night after night, in the company of just his few books and his clothes and the other few possessions that he could carry with him. He had very strong legs and loved to travel as far as his old feet would carry him. He didn't need or care about most of the things that we like to have around us, like the iPhone 4S, bicycles, snacks, movies, and TV. No. He was happy to explore whatever part of the world happened to be in front of his eyes. But every now and then, he did feel it was time for a nice warm bath and a comfortable bed and something good to eat. When this kind of feeling came, he would dig into one of the deep pockets of his long woolen coat and extract a small, smooth, round stone. It was dark in color, somewhere between purple and black, with little gold flecks of light in it. This was no ordinary, nice-looking stone. This was something rather special. But more about that later. One cold winter afternoon, the tramp was feeling especially tired, and maybe even a little lonely, which was unusual for him. After the sun had disappeared behind the trees of the thick forest, as the stars began to show themselves, he noticed a light off in the distance. His heart jumped just a bit, and he headed in that direction. Before too long, he was standing at the heavy wooden front door of an old house. By now it was very dark, and the tramp was shivering a little. The air around his ears felt like ice. Even the stone in his pocket felt cold. He knocked firmly on the door and waited. Nobody came, so after a few moments he tried again, and after a minute or so, yet another time. He was beginning to think about where to make a bed for himself in the forest when he noticed the door opening just a tiny crack.
Who is it, and what do you want?
He heard, not too clearly from the other side of the door. It sounded as though this person was not too excited about the idea of a visitor. The tramp answered in a big and kind-hearted voice, "I am just an old tramp, and I would like to ask a very small favor."
I don't like tramps, and I certainly don't do them any favors.
It seemed to be the voice of a woman, perhaps not so young. To himself, the tramp said, "This won't be as easy as I had thought." But to the door, he said in his most gentlemanly voice, "If you would only bring me a small crust of bread, I will be on my way. I am a poor old woman, and I have nothing in my cupboard, and I certainly have nothing to spare for the likes of you." The tramp began to wonder if he was just wasting his time, and his toes were starting to ache from the cold. But then he thought for a moment and said in his sweetest voice, "In that case, I would like to ask the tiniest of favors. A pot of boiling water? I would be most grateful to you." would a tramp want with boiling water? The voice had changed a little. Or maybe it was just the tramp's imagination. It is impossible to make stone soup without at least a little water, madam. What soup? Stone soup? Clearly, her voice had changed. Now, she was definitely curious. Yes, of course. Stone soup. The most delicious thing there is to eat on all the continents of this world. And you can believe me, I've been to every one of them. And what for exactly is the boiling water? Madam, if you would only open your door a crack, I will be most pleased to show you. Do not be afraid. And indeed, after a few more moments, the door opened wide enough to reveal a dark but cozy living room, at the other end of which was burning a small fire. The tramp carefully took the stone from his pocket and held it in front of the old woman's spectacles. It is really quite simple. Over a pot of boiling water, I have merely to rotate this stone 3 times and drop it in. After practically no time at all, there will be the most incredible, thick, rich, flavorful soup you can imagine. The woman scrunched up her face and studied the stone, as if it could reveal the answer to her next question. But how could it? Why is this stone so... The tramp gently interrupted her. Madam, why don't you allow me to prove it to you? After all, you have nothing to lose except a little time and a little water. Simply put up a pot to boil on that fire and kindly bring it here. She began to speak again, but then fell silent, all the while looking very carefully at this stone. Finally, very well, but you wait here. I will be back when the water is ready. And in just a few minutes, she returned with a large pot of water that was bubbling and steaming so much that it looked like the inside of a volcano. Very good, said the tramp. Now we can begin. Upon which he slowly turned around the dark stone 3 times in his hand and carefully dropped it into a large bubble. Before he could even ask, the old woman produced a heavy wooden ladle with which he began to slowly stir the water. Yes, this will make an excellent stone soup. You know, it takes a lot of practice to make a fine soup this way, he murmured and continued stirring. But it's a shame that it's already getting cold. He looked longingly at the fire through the slightly open door. After looking down into the soup for a very long moment, she said, "You may enter, but I warn you, when it is done, you must leave at once." Whereupon she carefully lifted the pot and slowly carried it back to the fire, while the tramp followed slowly behind. As they stood next to the fire, he said quietly, "This will be a delicious meal, I guarantee it." And then he picked up the ladle and put it gently to his mouth. You know, a soup like this is very rare. What a pity. We can't make it even better. With just a pinch of salt, it would be fit for a nobleman. Oh well, one cannot ask for everything in life, he sighed. The old woman continued to stare down into the pot. Then she looked up for a moment and silently disappeared around the corner. The tramp smiled, a very little smile. The woman returned, walking almost quickly. I just remembered there was a little salt left over. Why don't you put it in? Thank you. You know, there are chefs in some of the finest restaurants that don't know how to make this soup. The tramp continued to stir. What a pity. We can't make it even better. With just a potato. No, even half a potato. It would become a royal supper, fit for the prince and princess. The woman thought for a moment and left the room. She came back with a potato and a carrot. These I have been saving since last week. They are all the food I have left. How generous you are. I hope you will join me. We will eat a feast even the queen would envy. He kept stirring silently for a while. Can you smell what's happening here? It reminds me of the time I ate with the ambassador. I made this soup for him, and he could not believe how delicious it was. But of course, that time I used a little flour and milk as well. I think I must have some flour lying around. And I put my last cup of milk out for the cat. Perhaps she hasn't yet finished it. Sure enough, the woman returned with a cup of flour and another of milk. Into the pot they went. The tramp began to speak of his many travels. He was an excellent storyteller. The woman listened intently. Her eyes sparkled, and from time to time, she sighed in excitement. The soup kept bubbling as one by one she brought turnips, onions, cabbage, squash, noodles, and various spices. Little by little, the soup became rich and thick. All of a sudden, the tramp stopped in the middle of a story. It's done. You know, even the king rarely eats like this. We should eat it right now. And so, the woman set the table and brought out a loaf of bread, 2 glasses of wine, and even 4 long candles on silver candlesticks. They sat at the table, and the tramp continued to tell the most marvelous tales of faraway lands and people who spoke strange languages and wore the most amazing clothes. They ate and drank and drank and ate and drank some more. He told story after story, well into the night. Finally, they were both so full and tired that the woman offered the living room couch to the tramp, which he graciously accepted. In the morning, before he left, she even offered him a warm bath. As he walked through the door, he said, "It has been a great privilege to dine with you. I will remember this evening for a long time. She thanked him for teaching her the secret of stone soup, and watched as he turned and walked quickly away into the forest. She slowly shook her head. Imagine, she whispered to herself, and to think that such a soup could be made from just a small, dark stone.